on, and I think kids are very good at sensing, you know, what you're able to do. There was a lot of addiction in my adopted family. My brother was on heroin by our teenage years, late teenage years. My father was a judge, by the way. So just to set the scene, nice house, father's a judge, good school, son's on heroin, I'm doing every other drug, saying nothing wrong with me because I'm not doing that. So that just gives you a little picture. And my mum made lots of cups of tea and pretended nothing was happening. So I got sober. I'm going to, because this topic is all about, I really want to focus on the motherhood. And when I very first started doing talks years ago, it was all on motherhood stuff, which is what prompted me to talk about my adoption experience. And I haven't done this for a while. And talking about motherhood and mothers is like, oh, the most emotional thing for me. So I always have tissues. So don't worry if I blub. I might not. But it's the heart of a lot of the healing that I've done. So I got sober when I was 22 through a series of events. That's another talk on addiction, which I do a lot. And I got sober and I began to do work on myself. I met my birth mother. That's a whole other topic, reunion. It was very, you know, traumatic, if you like. I hadn't done the work on myself around adoption. And all I knew was I just felt, I put the drugs and alcohol down, and those feelings that I had been running from were right there. Now they were right here. How was I going to handle that? So I met my mother. It was complicated to begin with. I was having a relationship with her, not telling my adopted mother. And I finally left England after a few years. And in hindsight, I honestly think I just couldn't really cope with it all. And I hadn't done the work around the adoption, but I was sober, and I've maintained sobriety ever since. And I work hard on my sobriety to this day. So I moved to America and I met a man, got married quite quickly. And by the time I have 3 children, by the time I became a mother, I was 8 years sober. And I have to be honest with you, I kind of thought, you know, I'm 8 years sober, I'm ready to be a mother, I've worked on myself. Not really, not as much as I thought. Having babies, and I think for me, the reason that pregnancy and childbirth pushed me so deeply into having to deal more with being an adoptee is because there's such a cellular memory to all of this. And cellular memory, if nobody knows what that is before we were born, as we're sort of being knit together in utero, the cells retain memories. That's sort of the simplest way. So, you know, we're born with all these memories in the bodies, but a baby can't tell you, can't speak. So it becomes like a feeling. And I've heard adoptees share, you know, that feeling of panic, anxiety, all those kind of things, which was kind of like normal for me to feel all the time. And then when I got sober, and then of course I self-medicated all of that. And then when I got sober, I was learning other ways to deal with those feelings. But I still, even though I'd met my birth mother and I knew it was intense, I still didn't connect it all until I became pregnant. And, you know, so many people think babies are blank slates. But I absolutely don't. This is my personal opinion. Babies come with a history, and especially adoptees. You know, by the time I met my adopted mother, I'd already had 2 mothers, been left in a hospital for 10 days, probably held by who knows what, how many people. And then I was with my mother. So I came with a lot of history. But to my adopted mother at the time, and to many people, you know, babies don't know anything. And, you know, I've always loved babies. I'm just a real life. If there's a baby and I can hug it, I've always been like that. So during my pregnancy, and I had just started therapy, so I feel very lucky. I moved to LA, away from the adopted family, the birth family, met this man, got married, thought I'm doing great. And I went into therapy, finally, with a therapist who understood. She was an adoptee herself, and she understood the adoption experience. And I really recommend that, because she helped me find words to things that I couldn't at that time. And very soon after I was in therapy, I became pregnant. And one of the things I thought was I could not become pregnant because my adopted mother was infertile. Now, I'd met my birth mother. She'd had 3 kids. In my mind, even though it makes no sense, I thought, well, I'll never get pregnant because my mom, because she was infertile. And when I got pregnant, literally the first time I tried to have a baby, I did so many pregnancy tests. I mean, I laugh because I just couldn't believe it. I was like, huh? What do you mean I'm pregnant? I can't be pregnant. Like, I just could not believe that this was happening. And, I was thrilled, absolutely thrilled. And what happened to me during the pregnancy was I began to really have my own rebirthing experiences. And it sounds like nuts, but I can only tell a group of people like you, because I'm sure you will understand it. And luckily I phoned this therapist and I was embarrassed. I was like, is it normal to wake up in the night and start howling and feeling like you're going through a tunnel, and to be having nightmares that your baby that you haven't even given birth to is going to be taken away from you? And she was like, it's normal for an adoptee, yes. And I'm very grateful for that, because I think, and I've heard other adoptees since I've written about this experience, like, you can feel pretty crazy. And people could tell you you're pretty crazy because it sounds a bit crazy. But what she helped me understand was I was beginning to grieve the loss in a deeper way, not in, like in the cellular way where there's no words, where it all began. So during the pregnancy, it was hard to have those kind of dreams. And I couldn't tell other mothers, I'd go to like the workout pregnancy classes and they're all like, yay, it's so great. And I'm thinking, yeah, I was up half the night rebirthing and having nightmares that my baby's being taken away, but I'm fine. I never told people. And then when my son was born, it was a hard labor, well, it was definitely my first baby. It was very hard. But I had to go natural. I mean, I was so over the top. It had to be natural and it had to be this and he had to be with me. And I just went into this very attachment parenting to a point where it was probably way over the top. But what I didn't tell people was I thought if I left my baby in another room, he would disappear. And again, it's like, that makes no sense. He's in a room. How's he going to get out? He's a baby, he's not going to like climb out. And I kept this stuff to myself because I thought people are going to take this kid away from me. They're going to think I'm insane. But again, slowly I would tell the therapist, this is actually what's going on for me. And I began, I carried him around in a sling. And you know what? That's what I needed to do. And it was okay. And in many other countries, they actually do that with babies anyway. What the therapist told me and what I found really helpful is I was so worried that all my stuff was going to affect my baby. Here I am having this anxiety, I'm having this separation stuff from my baby, even though he's right with me. I'm beginning to feel the connection of what my birth mother went through, and I'd been very angry towards my birth mother. I was so angry. And I hadn't, before I got pregnant, I had very little compassion for her. I was just like, screw you, you gave me away, you're weak. You were a weak woman because I would never have done that. And that's, I'm going to be honest, that's how I viewed her. And then suddenly I have a baby myself and I start feeling this compassion for her, like, oh my God, how do you give away a baby? You must have to literally block off a part of yourself just to survive that, because the trauma, and I began to understand it. What I did feel during, being a new mother was it was very hard for me to talk to my adopted mother and to my birth mother. I had 2 mothers, but I actually felt quite motherless because I didn't want to go on too much to my adopted mother. Well, I didn't, you know, what could I ask her about nursing and attachment parenting when my mum had never had a baby and she had stuck me in another room to cry myself to sleep, which again was common in those days. So, and then when I would talk to my birth mother a little bit, I knew it was so painful for her. Like I could hear the silence, you know, when I'd say, did you nurse me? Like, did you, I wanted to know more about those early days. And I knew it was hard for her. I was going to say something, I've totally forgotten what I was going to say. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So when my son was born too, I realized the connection that I never had before. I knew the minute I knew what had been missing my whole life was I saw this baby, and I'm not saying adopted parents can't have a connection with their babies, but for me, I knew that my mother could not intuitively read me the way I intuitively could read my baby. And it was devastating. And there was a part of me, because I am an addict and I like feeling good, that I thought I'm just going to have loads of babies because I just love this feeling, and I'm going to have like 10 babies so I can keep feeling this feeling of connection that I've never had ever in my whole life until this moment. And as my baby got older, you know, 6 weeks, and you start thinking 6 weeks, that's when I was taken, you know, that's when I was still in foster care, 2 months, and I started really knowing babies know everything. One book I've read, by the way, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, fantastic book. If you want to know more about what goes on in utero and cellular memory stuff, I really recommend this book, Thomas Verney. So, you know, I went through a lot. I was over the top. I lied to my adopted mother. She's like, you're not still nursing that baby. No, I'd say, slept with the baby, all of that stuff. And I think I was probably the most exhausted mother I knew, because I never wanted my babies to feel what I felt, basically, which is kind of ridiculous in a way, because they weren't given up for adoption. And I had to keep being reminded, my babies had a different start to me. Between my son and my daughter, I had a miscarriage, and I was about 8 weeks pregnant, and I had a miscarriage, and oh my God, I was devastated. But during that time, and I hit a real grief sort of time around that. It really triggered stuff for me. And around that time, I thought I have to start writing about what it is to be an adoptee as a mother. And I actually talked to a lot of, I was going to write a book where I interviewed all these adoptees, and I did, and I sort of included some of it in the first book. And I began to see these commonalities that we had. And it was just fantastic, but sad, you know. And then I was like, this is the lifelong impact of adoption. It does not go away. You know, I always thought when I was little, when I grow up, I won't be adopted anymore. I actually really believe that. And what I've learned, you know, now in my 50s is it never goes away. But I learned to live with it, and I learned to live with the grief alongside me. You know, it doesn't like overtake me the way that, I mean, it can some days, but not the way that it used to. And when I had my miscarriage, you know, then I began to understand my adopted mother. And my adopted mother and I had had a really difficult relationship. You know, God bless my mom. I know she loved me, but she was really difficult. And a lot of it wasn't just me that said that. She was difficult. And it was impossible to talk to her about stuff. But there was this little window when I had my miscarriage where I could say to her, Mom, I'm sorry, you know. Always makes me cry. Sorry, I always cry there. I think what makes me so sad is that my mother never dealt with her infertility, ever. And nobody helped her. And she carried it, oh, it affected her whole life. And I've heard one adopted mother say, even adopting children did not heal my infertility. I was still an infertile woman, but now I had these babies. And what was so painful was that my mother couldn't be there for me because of her infertility. And when I had my miscarriage, the first thing she said was, well, at least you had a baby already. You know, who would say that, right, to a woman that had a miscarriage? Well, at least you've already had a baby, because it was too painful for her. And I understood it. I mean, believe me, I understood it. But that is the lifelong impact too of, you know, I really stress that we all have our grief. And when we come together, this triad, we have to individually work on ourselves, because we can't fix one another. None of us can. I couldn't fix my mother's infertility. My mum couldn't fix the fact that I lost my mother, and my birth mother couldn't fix that we hadn't been together all these years. And that's the hardest part of adoption for me, is going, what do you mean you now can't fix me? I've done all this work and now I still have to do more on myself. Like, screw that. Anyway, I told you I was going to cry, but I have my tissues. But the thing about the miscarriage, the positive stuff was it made me have compassion to my adopted mother, and it made me look at that infertility in a different way. And I began to write about my experience. I don't know what happened. The window opened. I was like, okay. And it connected me to the adoption world, which I love, and, you know, have been a part of ever since, really. I went on to have 2 more children. And each time, you know, it was interesting. I did like 1 million pregnancy tests. I should have taken out shares in pregnancy tests. And the second birth was long, of my first daughter. And by the time I had my third child, I think I had to have Pitocin with both babies. Pitocin is the thing, because my contractions would literally stop. And it was almost like I was holding on, like, I'm not even going to let this baby out because it's going to be taken away or something. So I had natural childbirth with Pitocin. Nobody does that unless you're frigging insane like me, because it's really painful. And the doctor kept saying, are you sure you don't want, like, you know, the drugs with the Pitocin? I'm like, no. I mean, now I would never do that. But by the time I had my third baby, I literally stood in the room and I gave birth like a warrior woman, and out she came. And I feel like I worked through a lot of my stuff. I was able to literally let go. I did attachment parenting again with all of them. And, you know, what I've learned, I mean, my kids are now 18, 20, and 24. My son is 20. Is he 24? Yes, 24. And over the years, you know, there's so much to talk about. I was also sadly, I got divorced about 7 years ago. What I had done within the dynamic of the family was sometimes feel separate from my own family. Like, I would look at my kids. I had no problem attaching to my children and feeling bonded and connected. I found it weird that they looked like me. You know, that family, I'd think it was freaky. Like, people would say, you know, your kids look alike. I'd be like, oh my God, she has my legs and she has my eyes. Like, you know, it's the familiarity that was so abnormal, but yet so normal, right? And but, you know, within the marriage, the dynamic was difficult. You know, I still was working out, in a way. It's like, I'm married. I hate to say this is on tape, but hey, that I sort of married my adopted mother, and I replayed the same role, did the same old role. I was the problem, and I felt separate. So you know, and I feel really badly for my children that they've had to go through all of this, you know, due to, if you like, stuff that I've had to work through in my life. I feel terrible about that, but it is what it is. And as the kids got older, you know, I think back to things like just sleepovers, where I had terrible separation anxiety as a child, to a point when, before I was on drugs, that is, my mother would have to come in the night to pick me up, because that feeling that I talk about, that I never had the words for, would, the panic, the anxiety would come up for me so much when I was a child. So when my children were like, we want to go stay the night at a friend, I was just like, are you sure? Now phone me in the night if you want to come home. And they're like, we don't want to come home, Mum. And I even remember my younger one going, I'm not adopted and I don't actually get separation anxiety. I was like, okay. So just, and then I began to know, hold on a minute, this is my stuff. My kids, they don't have my issues, and I don't want to keep putting it on them. You know, there's been loads over the years, obviously. My children know my birth mother. I remember them being very little and asking the questions, why did she give you away, Mummy? And you tell, well, you know, she was young, but why? But why? And then I would look at them and think, yeah, but why? It doesn't actually make sense. None of this makes sense, but it is the story. And one of my daughters thought that I grew inside Grandma Pat, who's my birth mother, for a little while, and the doctor cut a hole in my adopted mother's tummy, and I finished growing there. And I just thought, is that the most beautiful thing? She believed that's what happened, that you take it out and put it in another tummy, which I just thought was so beautiful. And I said, yes, in a way, you're right. I grew in their hearts, you know, in a different way. So there's been, you know, my kids, I mean, I don't think they have the same feeling around it, obviously, that I do, because they've always known my birth mother and my siblings from there. But in 2016, I actually met my birth father, which was miraculous, because he was Italian, and it had literally been like a one-night thing. And it turned, ancestry DNA, who knew? I tried years ago, and who knew I would ever find him? And I matched with a sister, also adopted. And it turned out my Italian father was living 1 hour away from me in New Jersey, and I'm from England. Like, what the hell are we doing? So we had a lovely relationship. He was completely mad, really Italian, and I adored him. But he did have, there are 7 of us, another sibling even showed up. And, you know, he wasn't responsible. And it's really hard for me to say that, because I was so enamored, and I fell in love with him. But the truth is, he kind of abandoned a lot of us. And recently I've had to, and he suddenly passed away in 2019. Oh, it was such a shock. 8 months after my adopted father died, I lost, and my mother died in 2008. We had a lot of, there was a lot of healing between us by that time. So, you know, there's been a lot of loss. There's been a ton of loss, and my kids were very protective when I met my birth father. It was very sweet. My son was very, are you sure this is the right man? And he really just didn't want me to be hurt, you know. Vittorio's wife had a very hard time with how many children that he had given up. And also she was ashamed. And when he died, she's cut off, she doesn't want to know me and my sister. So it's been very complicated. I'm aware of time, so I don't want to go on too much with, you know, I mean, there's so much to talk about, really. But my youngest went to college. You know, of course, we've had the pandemic, and it's all been a nightmare. But I dropped her off in the end of August last year. And, you know, I'm an empty nester, though they're both here, by the way. They came back. But that feeling of frigging panic and separation anxiety, and I think, do other mothers who are not adopted get it the same way? I think all mothers get it, absolutely. But again, we just have that extra layer. And I find it difficult, but I know what it is. And that's the great thing. Like, I've been to so many adoption conferences. because for me, I need to hear other people talk about this stuff that you don't hear out there, because out there people want to know that adoption is a wonderful thing, and they don't want to know about the lifelong impact. You know, they don't want to hear from somebody like me. Don't tell me in your 50s you're still grieving for this stuff. But I have a lot of joy in my life. You know, there's a ton of joy. My kids, I love being a mother. I've loved every moment, even when they're screaming at each other. You know what I mean? I love it. But we have a lot to juggle as adoptees. So I'm going to just, there was a couple of questions that were sent to me. So I think, Betsy, I'm just going to, because this will sort of add to what I'm talking about. Somebody wrote in, do you have any advice for working through one's first pregnancy in the early newborn days as an adoptee? I'm already having lots of adoption-related issues that I felt were managed prior to this pregnancy. Yeah, I totally identify with that. And again, I'll say in answer to this question, I think it's because we get in touch with the cellular memory, the body memory when we're pregnant, in a way that, you know, they say once you have a child, what is it? You know, your heart's like lives on the outside of you. And I literally feel that's what happened. That when I was pregnant, there were no walls anymore. They'd gone, whether I, you know, wanted them to be there or not. They had absolutely, I couldn't keep them up anymore. And so I would say to this lady that just be really gentle with yourself and know that you're not alone, that, you know, just talk to yourself and to the baby. That's the thing, which I really love. And this therapist said, because I'd say, I'm going to mess my baby up. You know, it's not even here yet. And look at me, I'm having nightmares and I'm supposed to be all calm and serene and I'm going to pass this on. I was so worried all the time. She said, talk to the baby. So I tell my babies, I go, you know what? Mummy's got a few things going on. And I just tell them, even when they were tiny. And I'd say that you are safe and you are loved. And this is not going to happen to you. And I think babies get it. In fact, I know that babies get it. That's my experience. So I would say also, you parent however you want to parent. Like, I would lie to people. You know, some people would think, oh, she's so over the top. Do you know what? It felt the most natural thing in the world was I knew that babies need to be with their mothers. I believe it in my depth of my being. When a newborn is born, you cannot spoil a newborn. You cannot spoil them. They need their mothers, and the mother needs them the same way. And in other countries, you know, like look in African countries, they don't even let the baby touch the ground, some of them, for the first year. They carry those babies on their backs. So maybe they know something we don't. It's just this weird society. You shove them in another room, in a nice, you know, decorated room. Babies don't care about decorations. They just want their mom. So that's really my personal thing. So I would say also reach out to other adoptees and just, you know, find someone to talk to if those feelings, because I get that those feelings are so profound. And I actually had somebody to tell me that I had a, you know, postpartum depression. And my therapist was like, absolutely not. You were finally grieving the loss that your mother, you lost your mother. You know, we're adopted. Our mothers, we lose our mothers. And everybody tells us to be grateful. You know, not, I'm sorry. I'm going to look at the questions in the box in a minute. Somebody wrote here, how does difficult to bond situations affect the adoptee's mother's experience, and what can be done to help succeed? I'm not sure if you're meaning difficult to bond with your baby or your own difficulties of bonding. I mean, I have had my own issues of bonding, you know, with grown-ups. With babies and animals, I'm absolutely fine. I have no problem whatsoever. So I'm not quite sure, but I would say, just keep talking about the adoption experience and get in touch with the truth of what it really means for you as an adopted person, not what everybody thinks you should feel. I think adoptees are so good at, yes, it's all great, and protecting the adopted mother, because if we don't protect them, what's going to happen to us? The loyalty issue can be really detrimental, actually. And I didn't know that for years. I just thought I have to be overly loyal because one, she's going to give me away again. And then I'm not being grateful because I could have ended up in a children's home, all the stuff that people say to you. So, and I would just say, spend time with your baby, just stay skin to skin attached to the baby, and I think it will just naturally start to happen. And if you need other advice, if it's really bad, if you're just not attaching to the baby, then you have to really seek professional help around that. Somebody wrote open adoption versus closed as relates to parenting for the adoptee. I'm not quite sure I understand exactly. I don't believe in closed adoption at all. I don't. I actually think it is I think it is a cruelty to humans, and I think it's awful. And actually, I think it is emotionally abusive to do that to a human being and say, we are going to not tell you your story, and we're going to put you with strangers, and you are going to adapt, and you are going to know nothing about who your parents are. To me, that's emotional abuse. Open adoptions really are the best way. If there has to be adoption, open adoptions for me. Hopefully, if both parties will connect. I mean, as a mother, I can love all my children, right, equally. I can love my mother's the same and my father's the same. Love is infinite, it's not, we all have enough love. And I think the fear often is from the adoptive mother, from what I've heard. I know with my mother, she was scared she was going to lose me. So actually, we're all worried about the same stuff. I'm going to look at these questions here. Somebody wrote, are your children comfortable with your biological parents? Do they feel guilty that they have a relationship with them, feeling bad for your adoptive grandparents? At the beginning, I have to be honest, when my kids were little and my mum was alive, I would tell them, and this is terrible, I'd say, don't go on too much in front of Grandma Jean about Grandma Pat. I did it. And my ex-husband said, you are making them do what you did as a kid. And it's not fair to do that to them. So I had to really let go. It was all the fear again. And I had to say, my mum is a grown-up. My adoptive mother is a grown-up. And I can't be protecting everybody. So, and my mum actually died, 2008. So they were still quite little. And my adoptive father never really spoke about anything to anybody, to be honest with you. It's kind of very British, and that was it. So we didn't really have to worry too much about him. I'm an adopted woman with biological children. It wasn't until tonight, listening to you, that I realised I've been far more attached to my children than to my husband. It seems normal to me. Oh, than my ex-husbands. Yeah, us adoptees seem to have a lot of ex-husbands. My adoptive parents always put each other first. I just couldn't do it. I am with you. And my ex-husband said that the dog was loved more than him, He was actually treated completely like a king, my dog. And I tell you, it's the same thing. I totally get it. And what I think is, for us, I mean, listen, I can't speak for everybody, I have to speak for myself, is it's safer. It's safer to love my children, safer to love a baby and to love a dog than a grown-up person who could abandon me or hurt me again. So maybe it's that for you too, I don't know. I'm so thankful to hear you speak about this. For the first time in my life, carrying my twins made me feel human. I want 25 more babies. To hear you say this is why. This brings me some peace, thank you. Oh, twins, good luck. Good luck to you with your twins. Yeah, I would have had loads. It's actually a good job I didn't start younger, because I would have had tons of babies, and they do grow up. You have to pay for various things. Thank you, Zara. Your lectures. The first time I have felt that someone understands the strange thoughts and experiences I have had in this pregnancy, even the dreams. In my dreams, the babies keep disappearing from the pram or the crib or what have you. I thought I was perhaps going a bit crazy. Many thanks for the reassurance that we can get through this as mothers. One dream I'm just suddenly remembering is with my third, or I can't even remember actually which pregnancy. I dreamt that I went to the hospital, up to the nurse's station, and I was like, I've come here to collect my baby, please. You know, talk about an adoptee dream, right? That they're going to go back and give me the baby. So I thought I had PPD. I was treated for PPD. It was not depression. It was overwhelming fear and anxiety that I was not equipped to be a mother. My mother gave me away. The anxiety and fear swallowed me, the fear of not being enough. Yeah. I had, occasionally I would have these weird thoughts that I was going to just give my baby away, because if that's what my mother had done, maybe I was going to do that. They were fleeting thoughts, and they actually made me feel physically ill, even just having the thought. But that's the honest truth, it was there. It may be better prepared to help my adoptive daughters as they get to the parenting stage. I may be a bit of an enigma, but I definitely feel more attached to my adoptive kids than to my bio kids. I never say that out loud. This is likely due to having kids young, before I was fully developed personally or professionally when they were born. Just a comment. Yeah, that's interesting. I think the thing also to remember is that, think of how to say this. So an adoptive parent is so excited, right? I think of my mom, an infertile woman. Finally, she's told there's a baby. You're going to have your baby. And the excitement and the thrill, and she gets this baby. And my mum loved babies. There's no doubt she loved us. So she is loving us and hugging us, and she's thrilled she finally has her baby. But the truth is, I'm not attaching back to her the way a natural baby would attach back to her. It's just not going to happen. Now, adoptees are really good at making it look like it's happening, because that's what babies do for survival. They have to. Otherwise, they know that they're going to die. So babies may look like they're good at attaching, and then there's all this secret, silent stuff going on within us as we're getting older that we're not able, some of us, or I wasn't able to say to my mother. And the reason I really know this is from when I had my baby, there is just a knowing. You know, they say when you're pregnant, and I believe stuff in utero, baby picks up everything in utero. They do. My mother, my birth mother, pretended she was not pregnant. Now, I didn't know all these details, and a bunch of years ago, I can't remember who it was through, somebody sent me, they asked me, would I be part of this thesis thing that somebody was writing on they needed adoptees and birth mothers. So they sent us the forms and they asked me all these questions. How did you feel in the first trimester? Not of me being in utero. And I just sort of started writing what I felt. And each time I wrote, I feel like I'm in a room knocking on a door and nobody's listening, nobody's hearing me. And different, I can't remember what else, but there was all these things. And then my birth mother, she filled out hers. And she sent hers back to me. And I was like, I've got to read it. I've got to read it. So I had to ask her. I was like, I'm going to rip it open and read it. And my ex is like, no, you can't. That's, you know, it's wrong. You have to ask her. And she said, you're not going to like what you read. And I thought, but I know it anyway. And everything she wrote, the first trimester, I ignored my baby. I thought about abortion. I just wanted to get rid of it. Second trimester, I ignored my baby, and I'd match it up to what I wrote. It was the same. We know it. So actually, it was sort of a relief. I mean, obviously, it doesn't feel good to know your mother wanting to abort you the whole time, but I'd always known that. So now I could really start healing, and knowing that it was just the, you know, the circumstance of the time. It should be a requirement that APs get individual and couples therapy to process their infertility. I absolutely agree with you. And I've done talks in the past with, and social workers have said to me, when I've talked about this topic, we cannot talk to adopted parents the way you are because they don't want to hear it. Many adopted parents, they can't, I mean, you know, they've been through hell, right? They've done the IVF and the this and the that and the miscarriages. So what I hear and what I've learned is by the time they get to the adopting, it's like, don't even tell me I've got to deal with this. I want a baby to fix me right now. And they don't want to know. So you can talk about it, but unless you're a person that is ready to really work on yourself and take that in, I don't know. Because I do think that education is out there, but from what I hear is sometimes adopted parents can't hear it until later. You know, like when I was crying before and I was thinking about this adopted mother who was so brave, you know, with her children were older, and she was the first adopted mother that said, I don't feel so attached to my kids. I mean, I'm still infertile, and that's the bit I was running from. But it took her a few years to understand that. Another comment is, I'm an adoptive mum and my daughters have become mothers. Any suggestions on how to best support them? I suppose just as much as you would, you know, as you can as a mum, like just support. And I mean, I suppose it depends on your relationship, whether they have stuff coming up around their adoption. And if you're able to talk openly about that, I think that would be great. I think, you know, I mean, obviously you're an open adoptive mum because you're here listening. And I would just say that if they have any feelings coming up, if they haven't searched, you know, often adoptees don't search until they become mothers themselves. So I don't know whether they've already done that journey or not. If they haven't, that might start to come up. But maybe just being sort of aware that they may be more emotional in certain situations that other mothers might find easier, they might find harder to let go of, and it might look weird, like, why are you being so overprotective or whatever, and just know that it's coming from that wounded place, you know, and maybe just help support them if that makes sense. Somebody wrote, I love connecting with another adoptee who your story, I totally relate to the anxiety and fear of separation when your child goes to college. I started preparing when he was a sophomore. I survived her first year away, then she moved back home. I'm glad I'm not the only one who goes through this. I wonder if you will feel that way again when your children move out for a second time. Well, the pandemic's weird, right? Because they're back and forth, but yeah. As long as I know where they are, you know, it's that thing of, it's easier for me to leave somebody, but I don't want anybody leaving me. That's what I know about myself too. Oh, I can leave, see ya, but don't you dare. And that goes for anybody. Friends, kids, boyfriends, don't do it. I'm an adoptee and adoption attorney. I advise prospective adopted parents that they must mourn the loss of the biological child that they aren't going to have before they are ready to adopt a child. And I so agree with that. And one thing I forgot, which you really, this has reminded me of, and I wrote when I did this play a few years ago, one of the characters was the daughter that my mother never had. She was like the ghost sister. And I'll never forget, I don't know if any of you have heard of B.J. Lifton, but she's wonderful. Adoptee's written these fantastic books, and she talks about the ghost kingdom, of how we live in the adopted home with the ghosts of the adopted the birth parents, the ghosts of the children that could have been. So you're living with ghosts, and that's how I felt my whole life. They were right there, living right alongside me. And I knew who my mum's daughter was. Sounds like I'm a fruitcake, right? But you will get it. I knew her personality. I knew exactly what she looked like. My mum, adopted mum, was very short with blonde hair and huge boobs. And I was like dark, had this skinny little kid, and everyone would be like, is that your mum? Huh? You don't really match. So I knew my mum's daughter. I knew exactly what she looked like. And I used to think about her, and I went to hear BJ talk, and she said, it's really hard to compare yourself to perfection, isn't it? And I'm like, I am that nuts that I have been comparing myself to somebody that does not exist. That's what happens to adoptees in closed adoptions, because of the secrets and the not being given a story. We create our own for survival, I think. Anyway, I think that is it. Yeah, somebody's just written, birthing my children was the impetus to my coming out of the fog, which really, really has been the case for me. But I'm so grateful for it, because even though it is, God, it's just not an easy journey. And in my next life, I'm definitely not coming back as an adoptee. I want to be a dog. You get so much love. Actually, dogs are adopted. No, forget that. I'll have to think of something else. You know, there is really no other way, but we have to look at this stuff to lead more fulfilling lives and to experience the joy, you know. And I really do. I mean, being a mother for anybody, or parent, mother, father, it's fantastic. I mean, there's really nothing like it. And I don't want my stuff, you know, I've been aware, to spoil the enjoyment of that, and to also be self-centered, you know, to make it, I'm the mother, it's all about, oh, I've had all this stuff. I've been really aware of that. I don't want my kids to feel that either. So if anyone has any more questions or comments, or wants to even speak, I think you're allowed to do that. I don't know. Betsy?
Sure, if anybody has any other last questions, you can pop in if you want to, if you're comfortable doing that. Otherwise, oh, there's one more comment.
This has been so affirming to hear. Thank you, Zara. I have to agree, attachment parenting has been wonderful for me and my son. Oh. I wish people would learn more and not be afraid about attachment parenting, because actually, you know, it gives kids, they end up becoming way more confident. You know, people are always worried about spoiling babies, but I don't believe you can spoil a baby. And the more that the needs are met when a baby is younger, you know, they actually end up being more confident, I think. Oh, BJ Lifton, I'll write it in here. And she's written 2 books full of a bunch of stuff. She passed away a few years ago. She's like, was very elderly adoptee, actually writing things about adoption way before everyone else. She wrote Journey of the Adopted Self and Lost and Found. And, but you know, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, Thomas Verney, I just really recommend that, especially with pregnancy, because he really, really describes everything. And Nancy Verrier, The Primal Wound. A very hard book to read, I think, for adoptees. Actually, it's quite painful, but it's very, very good. And I think my friend Gabrielle is on here. She's just written a new book called The American Baby, and it's a fantastic book. I'm in the middle of reading it, and she's going to do a book launch. We're going to do that in a couple of weeks, and that's really on the history of adoption. And she talks a bit about in the book about, you know, the styles of parenting and what they thought they knew, you know, what babies could deal with. But I think they got it completely wrong, personally.
Well, thank you, Zara. This has been fantastic. It was obviously very meaningful for everyone that was here. So you share so much from the heart. It's really wonderful. To remind people, we do have recordings of our speaker series on our website. I put the link to the website in the chat box, and a few closing announcements. So let's see.
One thing, Betsy.
Yes.
Someone has the name iPhone. I was just wondering what their name is so I can make a note of their name.
Okay, so if you're comfortable doing that, and you can put your name in chat. If you're just showing up as iPhone, that would be helpful. We just try to keep track of who's here. And we do have certificates of attendance available, I should mention. That's one reason that we keep track of who's here. You have to ask for them ahead of time. So for future series, if you are a foster parent or an adoptive parent and you would like a certificate for your agency, we can provide that. As many of you know, Adoption Network Cleveland is a nonprofit organization. We serve individuals and families impacted by adoption, kinship, and foster care. We're extremely excited to be partnering with experts in our state, national, and local community to offer this Monday evening speaker series. In addition to this series, we have multiple opportunities for support, education, and advocacy. The link that I put in the chat is to our calendar, so you can see what we have coming up, both on Monday evenings and beyond. We have lots of different opportunities throughout every single month. We are a membership organization, and we hope that you'll consider joining us as a member. To find out more about the organization and to join, you can also see the website. And our next Monday evening speaker series is January 25th. We're having Moses Farrow, who's going to be interviewed by Tracy Anders, discussing the link between adoption trauma and generational trauma and why we all need to come out of the fog. So that's interesting because coming out of the fog came up tonight as well. We also next week have a special event, discussion group on the TV show This Is Us that I know is touching on a lot of adoption themes and has a lot of followers in our community. So if you would like a community to discuss, you can see that on our website as well. And we have several other events. Zara did mention Gabriel Glazer. I don't know if it's on the calendar yet because we're still putting it together, but Gabriel is going to be our Monday evening speaker series speaker on Monday, February 8th. So right after her book comes out on the 26th. I'm really excited. It's getting lots of positive attention already. So thank you, everybody. And we will have the recording of this posted as soon as possible. It usually takes at least a few days.
I'm just going to plug my book, if I may. This is the latest one, Somebody's Daughter.
Thank you. Do you have Mother Me handy to show?
Mother Me, you know what, I don't know.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Mother Me, you'll see it on my Amazon. But the Somebody's Daughter still covers the pregnancy stuff, not as much. It's more of the journey, the reunion journey. So
good. Well, thank you. This was wonderful, Zara.
Thank you.
Really glad to have you this evening. All right. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.